Joining me now for more on the declining situation in New York and the leadership vacuum in Washington, Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. Congresswoman, first, let me start with a local check-in of my beloved home borough, the Bronx, a place that in many ways is similar to Newark, a place where there are a lot of folks who are just barely getting by, barely making rent every month, barely holding things together, who've now had a meteor hit their life. And what do you want to see out of this package that's getting hammered out right now for your constituents and those folks?
Well, I think there are critical things that we need, that all Americans need, but especially in the Bronx and in Queens. We need to make sure that we get paid sick leave to workers. We need to make sure that we get sufficient checks to people. I would like to see a mortgage and rent moratorium and a moratorium on major payments in the United States. The thing is that people are talking about these cash infusions, and there's not much that a small $1,000 can do for a family if they are out of work and still need to pay rent, student loans, major consumer loans, a mortgage, etc. And so we really need to make sure that the dollars and dimes actually make sense and add up for a working family's expenses for a month. And it needs to be lined up with the science as well in terms of how long we're asking people to self-quarantine.
So I've heard sort of two approaches to this, right? I mean, what you're saying there, which makes a lot of sense, which is if people have these expenses and they have student loan debt or they have mortgage debt or they have rent and they can't pay it because they don't have work. The other sort of approach and an approach that a lot of European countries have taken is you actually want to keep all the payments flowing as much. You just want to originate with them with the government. So in places like Denmark and in the UK and others, basically having the government guarantee the payroll for people so that you're essentially trying to pretend the economy isn't getting shut down and let the government backstop it. But that's not how the current $500 billion is structured in the current plan being worked out, as I understand it, but maybe you have a better insight.
No, right now, within this $2 trillion deal, there is $500 billion that right now seems to be no strings attached. We are not saying if we give you money, you need to keep your workers. If you take the public money, you need to make sure that you don't fire anyone. If you take the government's money, that you have to institute XYZ worker protections. This bill is in flux, and so things are subject to change. But right now, it's pretty much a no strings attached, free $500 billion that will be used, according to Larry Kudlow, looks like will be leveraged into much more money than that. And I think that there's huge concerns here because there's talk about there being an inspector general and there being a panel. But from what we're seeing in the bits and pieces of language that we're able to kind of scrap together is that all of these entities really have no policing authority. They don't have the ability to actually stop these funds from going to the Trump properties, to going to any Trump organization, from going to saying, hey, McDonald's or Amazon, if you're going to take this money, you need to make sure that we're guaranteeing paid sick leave to workers. So I think that there's a lot of problems with accountability. And meanwhile, we're expecting to essentially give small businesses loans, which is, we can structure them, we can make sure that they're forgiven. But honestly, I'm very concerned about this bill prioritizing working people above corporations. And I think that's really what we need to look out for in the developments of this bill.
It seems to me that one of the most difficult, tricky middle spaces here, and there's been some progress on this. There's a provision from Marco Rubio and Susan Collins, and I think Chris Coons, if I'm not mistaken, for small businesses. But obviously, you've got a ton of small businesses in your district, tons of small businesses across New York and in major metro areas, where unless there's some very immediate help, it's essentially an extinction level event.
Yes, exactly. And the problem, too, with the way that a lot of small business loans and the SBA is structured is that we could unleash a ton of money, through small business loans. A lot of these small businesses may not see it for months in terms of what gets approved today. And so the problem is that we're giving $500 billion to big businesses whose liquidity and efficiency will be set up to be much better, to be much more efficient in distribution of funds that'll probably be as quickly available as humanly possible. But meanwhile, the billions of dollars that we allocate for restaurants, small businesses, and any other form of small business will take months to get to them. So what we may see is the closure, what we risk if we don't get this right, if we do not get this right, we risk small businesses across the country shutting down and big businesses experiencing a total payday with lack of accountability, further consolidating our economy. And that will create a generational issue. If we think income inequality is bad now, we really need to make sure that we get this right to prevent the worst possible outcome.
All right, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.